What's up everyone and welcome. In today's recipe we're going to be making Hui Guo Rou. I'm not 100% sure on the pronunciation, but this is also known as Sichuan twice cooked pork. To make this mighty fine dish, let's start by preparing some pork belly. What I've got here is a relatively thick piece of pork belly which has a good fat to meat ratio. First thing we need to do is to give the skin a quick blast with a blowtorch, and this will remove of any unwanted hairs on the skin. Next we can gather these aromatics listed above. These are going to infuse the liquid that we're going to boil the pork in, and that's exactly what we're going to do next. Add the scorched pork belly into a large pan or wok, then add half a sliced white onion, 10 grams of sliced ginger, 2 tablespoons of rice wine, and finally 1 generous tablespoon of Sichuan peppercorns. Now add enough cold water so that the pork is nicely submerged. When ready, it's now time to start the first part of the cooking process. Take the pan or wok in this case and place onto a medium to high heat. And from here we want to slowly bring the liquid up to a boil. And as the water starts to heat, you'll notice that some impurities will rise to the top. We want to remove as much of this as possible, as this won't make the pork taste too great. When just about boiling, the water should now be infused and it's time to put a lid over the top. It's now at this point where we can turn the temperature down to a low simmer. Then we want to slowly simmer the pork for a good 45 minutes. 45 minutes of boiling later and the pork should now be cooked. Carefully remove from the boiling liquid and try and remove of any excess. We want to try and get this piece of pork as dry as possible. Set the pork belly to one side and allow to completely cool. When slightly more manageable, place into the fridge and allow to cool even further. And when completely chilled and slightly firmer, the pork is now ready to work with. Slice the pork belly into 2 equal sized pieces, and this will make carving far much easier. Now we can rotate the pork onto the skin side and begin to slice into thin bite-sized pieces. We don't want the slices to be neither too thin or too thick, and something like this will be perfect. When sliced, we should now be left with quite a bit of pork belly. Then when ready, place all of the slices onto a tray for now. The pork is now ready to be stir-fried, but we'll come back to this later. Before we begin to cook, it's time to prepare some vegetables and some aromatics. I find it better to prepare these now, as this will make the cooking process nice and smooth. First, remove the top and tail of a handful of green beans and slice into half. Roughly chop a bunch of green onions into largest batons. Slice half a white onion into relatively thick slices. And lastly, finely slice a thumb-sized piece of ginger and 4 garlic cloves. Store the onions and garlic separately, as we'll add this at a different stage to the other vegetables. Keep the vegetables to one side for now. We can move on to preparing a few aromatics. These next few ingredients are what's going to give this dish that Sichuan flavour. We're going to need 1 teaspoon of Sichuan pepper, and I like to run a knife through this as no one likes to eat a whole peppercorn. 2 tablespoons of doubanjiang, which is a key ingredient when making Sichuan food. And we can also go ahead and roughly chop this too to smoothen out the paste. And the next ingredient is optional, but I like to add half a cup of chopped dried red chillies. And finally, we're going to need 1 to 2 tablespoons of fermented black beans. And now that all the ingredients are ready, we can now begin to cook. Take out your go-to seasoned wok or pan and place onto a high heat. Next, add half a cup of neutral cooking oil. Wait for the oil to get up to around 160 to 170 degrees centigrade, and when nice and hot, we first want to go in with the sliced green beans. And from here we want to hard fry these for around 45 to 60 seconds. When ready, the beans should almost look kind of dehydrated. Now remove from the hot oil and place the green beans to one side for now, and we'll come back to these later. Remove of some of the oil from the wok and place back onto a high heat. And when nice and smoky hot again, we can add some of the sliced pork belly. At this point we want to stir fry the pork until nicely caramelized. This should take around 2 to 3 minutes, and we want to keep the wok nice and hot and keep the pork constantly moving. As the pork is already cooked, we're only looking for a nice caramelization here, and a good caramelization means more flavor. When ready, the pork should now look a little something like this, and it's at this point we can remove the pork from the wok and place alongside with the green beans. Now to the wok we can add the doubanjiang, roughly chopped Sichuan peppercorns, and the thinly sliced garlic and ginger. Stir fry for a minute or 2. We want to activate all those wonderful aromatics. When fragrant, we can add the pork belly back into the wok, then coat in those smoky aromatics. Continue to stir fry on a high heat, and at this point the flavors should be pretty intense. And all we need to do now is to add a little bit of balance to this dish. We can now also add some sliced white onion, the fried green beans, 1 to 2 tablespoons of dark soy, and 1 teaspoon of white sugar. Continue to stir fry for a few more minutes. We want all those ingredients to get to know each other. When ready, the pork should now have a nice char and the onions should have softened. Finish the dish by adding the dried chopped red chilies, a good handful of the chopped spring onion, and finally 1 to 2 tablespoons of the fermented black beans. Mix well, then stir fry for a final minute to soften the spring onions and to infuse the black beans. Adjust the seasoning by adding either dark soy, sugar, or you could even add some black rice vinegar. And when happy with the seasoning, we can remove from the heat and it's now time to serve. Hui Guo Rou is best served with rice, but I guess you could eat it as it is if you want to chill on the carbs. Empty out this delicious stir fry into a serving bowl. And I find the best way to serve this is like a good Chinese restaurant and serve it family style. Make sure to empty out all of those aromatics, then the dish is finally ready. This is Sichuan Food 101 and it's a must try if you've never had it before. The pork is crispy but tender and packed full of flavour. I think if you didn't eat pork, then a cut of lamb would probably work really well with this dish. A little additional bump of cumin and black vinegar would also set this dish off. If you made it till this far, thank you for watching and I hope you guys enjoyed this Sichuan recipe. And of course, if you did enjoy the video and you haven't already, feel free to slap that subscribe button. Appreciate you guys and this was fun. Got a pretty interesting recipe coming up next and I'll see you guys next week. Have fun and peace.